Tell me a little bit more about what you saw with your son's friends that concerned you.
Yeah, and boy, some of my son's friends might be watching this podcast, so I don't want to cast a broad brush and have them think, Dave, what does Mr. French think about what, you know?
Mm-hmm,
No,
mm-hmm.
I'm very proud of my son.
Yeah.
I have he has wonderful young men in his life, but I'm talking writ large. I'm talking about his broader peer group, okay? And one thing, there's a couple of things that I saw. Definitely alienization from the academic world. No question. That thing that your son said about, like, I did well for a girl, absolutely saw that with this sort of sense that this sense of this isn't communicating to me, this isn't reaching me. Definitely saw the effects of sort of inhibiting and play. That's another big one. You know, when I was in first grade in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, I was born in Alabama, raised in Alabama, Louisiana, Tennessee to Kentucky, so all across the South. When I was in first grade in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, we had 3 recesses a day. 3 recesses a day. And they were crazy and they were wild. And all growing up, you know, we played tackle football at recess in my elementary school in Stamping Ground, Kentucky. So it was just a different experience growing up. And so much more constrained play, a sense that school wasn't really for them. A loss of the free-range childhood. I know you've talked to Jonathan Haidt in the past, but this sort of loss of the broader play-based childhood where kids roam the neighborhood. That's what I did when I was growing up. The number of forts I cut through thick underbrush. I mean, by the time I was like in middle school, I was a master builder of rural fortifications. Like, I mean, you know, you would just go and leave and play and come back, and your parents would, my parents were great. They would make me be home for dinner, and then, what'd you do? And then I would tell them about my adventures, and boom, I'd be out again until, you know, my curfew. And so all of those things have resulted in this sense of the loss of all of that, this sense of growing frustration, this sense of growing recklessness. And then you made this medication point that's I think, very important. I don't want to paint with too broad a brush. There are a lot of people for whom medication has been important, but I feel like it's been overprescribed at a large scale. And so then you take
methylphenidate is inexcusable. Everything about it is a lie. You know, the original hypothesis, just to be clear about this, is that there were a small subset of children who were neurologically abnormal. And if you put them on a stimulant, which is what methylphenidate is, most common ADHD medication, it's an amphetamine, that paradoxically calmed them down. And the fact that they calmed down was an indication of their neurological abnormality. Okay, every single bit of that is a preposterous lie. What methylphenidate does is increase the probability that you will continue to attend to whatever you happen to be attending to. It locks you on, and it suppresses play behavior. And there's no evidence whatsoever that it has a paradoxical effect on a small subset of children with attention deficit disorder. What it does quite clearly is stop boys from playing roughly, especially the ones that are more extroverted and, well, more sociable, more assertive, more talkative, all of that, more boisterous. And so I don't think there's any evidence at all in the clinical literature of the medium to long-term utility of attention deficit disorder medication. I don't think there ever has been. Like, I've followed that literature since 1982. In fact, the first scrape I had in graduate school was with a professor at McGill who was at the forefront of ADHD research and who was a methylphenidate advocate. And I criticized her papers on the grounds of no long-term follow-up. And it's some preposterous percentage of boys now are put on methylphenidate medication. And so
when I was a kid is when it really began starting, because I can remember when some of my peers would start to go on Ritalin.
Yeah.
And you know, and that was even back in the day when I'm Gen X. I mean, we were the ultimate free range generation. I was a latchkey kid for a little while. And so you take all of these things, less play, less ability to, you know, the academic environment, less hospitable, less recess, and then there's a lot of downstream consequences of that. And then you say, here's a pill. No, that was not the path. And again, I don't want to overstate this, but I will say that we went too far in that direction. And we've paid a lot of well-meaning doctors, a lot of well-meaning parents doing the best they could with the circumstances that they had, fell into this. And it's just been so tragic. And so one of the reasons why I'm such a booster, for example, of Jonathan Haidt's work is that he really wants to get us back to that play-based childhood. And look, everything's trade-offs. It's an interesting irony that the latchkey kid generation became the helicopter parents. The Gen X generation, we were the latchkey kids, and it's my generation that hovers over their kids, and even more than helicopter, the snowplow parent that like clears the way. And I think one of the reasons is some of the excesses of the latchkey world were really negative. I mean, there's a lot of bad stuff that happened in that total free range environment. But then there was this overcorrection that went all the way to tightly managed play. And, not to refer too much to Jonathan, but there's in his book, The Coddling of the American Mind, with my dear friend Greg Lukianoff, was really important. And one of the ways that really helped open my eyes and helped me put a finger on what was happening was offering this contrast. Like in my generation, how young were you the first time you left a house without supervision? And for me, the answer is I was really young, maybe 7, 8. I'm not out of the question that it was even 6 years old. But you ask parents now, and they might raise their hand and say, well, when my kid was 14, we tried to raise like free range kids, and it was difficult even in rural Tennessee, because we would get to the point where we would tell parents as they were coming over, they were letting their kid come over to play. We would say, look, we have a philosophy where we let our kids run around the neighborhood and play. Is that okay with you? Because we wanted to pre-clear that, because some parents would say, I would really rather not, if that's okay. That is not something that would come up in 1984.
What kind of neighborhood? What kind of neighborhood was that?
It was a rural Tennessee neighborhood. We lived literally across the street from us was just open pasture. And behind us was another street with a cul-de-sac. And then we moved from there to the very opposite of that, one of these very densely planned communities right outside of Nashville. Both of them remarkably safe, but both of them very different. One was very outdoors. One was very much like, if you were going to run through the woods, you were going to encounter a bunch of deer. You were going to encounter turkeys. You were going to encounter, there were coyotes in the hills. And the other one was, well, you're going to encounter a coffee shop and a pizzeria. But in both of them, some parents, and this is Tennessee, red Tennessee, some parents were totally cool with the free range, but a lot were absolutely not.
In both situations.
In both situations.